It is wide receivers part 2, aka the Tank Dell Show. Yeah, we've got an exciting late round pick. Definitely someone we need to talk about. Welcome to a Friday morning podcast. It is August 11th. We've got a mailbag coming up later today. If you want to watch it, youtube.com/fantasyfootball today. Or if you're just listening, you'll hear it on Saturday. Adam Azer, Heath Cummings, and Jamie Eisenberg. So we're going to go through ADP today. If you missed the end of yesterday's show, we focused on the round 1 wide receivers. Jefferson, Chase, Kupp, Tyreek Hill, and Stephon Diggs. We talked about all of them at length. Today, we'll start with CeeDee Lamb and the rest of the round 2 guys, and we'll go basically through the end of draft. So which mid-round breakout's going to have that big league-winning year? Is this finally Jerry Jeudy's time to shine? You heard Dave talk about how much he likes Jeudy yesterday. Is DeAndre Hopkins done at his age, or is he going to be a great value or somewhere in between? And how about the year 2 wide receivers? How many of them are going to have major impacts? All right, Heath, why don't we start with round 2? And we'll use Fantasy Pros average draft position in PPR leagues again. And it is CeeDee Lamb at the very beginning of round 2. Davante Adams, A.J. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Garrett Wilson, and Jalen Waddle. So you said yesterday that Waddle is not in the same tier as the other guys, right? Because he's not the number 1 guy on his team, right?
He's not in the same tier for me as the other guys. I wouldn't say talent-wise he's not. I think he absolutely belongs there, but I do think that the target disparity between he and Tyreek Hill, listen, I think if you put Waddle, Smith, like those number 2 wide receivers who we still think could maybe sneak into the top 12, just about, 10 spots later in ADP for me than the guys who are the number 1s, the A.J. Browns, the Amon-Ra St. Browns, the CeeDee Lambs, those guys.
And Jamie, what do you think overall about this group? It's Lamb, Davante, A.J. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Garrett Wilson, Jalen Waddle. Do you love all 6 of them?
Absolutely. And I would put DeVonta Smith there too. I love all those guys. I think they're all round 2 picks, or at worst case scenario, early round 3.
Do you see a separation in those 6?
No, I don't. I mean, well, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, there is a separation in those 6, which is why they're ranked where they're ranked. But there's the ability to be number 1 wide receivers, top 10 wide receivers, with a chance to maybe be top 5 if things really go right. But yes, I think all those guys, those 12 should be the top 12, and there's a lot to love about all of them.
I hate to be a jerk. I think that's 11, though. Oh, no, you have Smith 12. Okay, I'm sorry. DeVonta Smith would be okay.
Yeah, I mean, again, 136 targets last season, more receptions on his team than A.J. Brown, and entering his 3rd year. So I think building off the way that he finished last year is going to matter this season for him having another standout performance.
Do you like him better than Davante Adams?
No. The cutoff for me for Adams is after I would take Adams over Jalen Waddle. But I think Garrett Wilson, Amon-Ra St. Brown, A.J. Brown should all be going ahead of Davante Adams.
Do you both have CeeDee Lamb 6?
No, I have Amon-Ra St. Brown 6.
Oh, that's right. Heath?
I have Lamb 6, St. Brown 7, Adams 8.
Okay, so you have the same top 7 in some order with those 5 we talked about, and then Lamb, St. Brown, or St. Brown, Lamb. Okay, so that's in PPR. What about in like half PPR? Is St. Brown still a top 7 guy for both of you?
Yes.
Yeah, I think the problem is I'd probably have him 8th because I'd move A.J. Brown ahead of him in half PPR.
Let's compare these guys to some of the running backs that are going in that range, like Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, Jonathan Taylor, and Tony Pollard. How many of those wide receivers should be taken ahead of Henry, Taylor, Jacobs, Pollard? Or should we just do like 1 and 1? Should we take one wide receiver if we can? One wide receiver there, but this might be just a 2nd round pick. Actually, this might be just, you have to choose one or the other. Jamie, what do you think about them against those 4 running backs, Jacobs, Taylor, Henry, Pollard?
In a vacuum, I would take the wide receivers, but it would obviously depend on what I did in the 1st round, how I started my team. So I think if you started your team with a receiver and you want to have some balance, you could certainly go with one of those running backs. If you want to go running back, that's certainly a route you can go. If you want to go wide receiver, that's an easy thing to go. But in a vacuum for me, I have all those running backs actually after Jalen Waddle. So those running backs don't start for me until 19th overall with Henry.
Okay.
And this is where, like I think that the split happens because I said 10 picks. These running backs, except for Pollard, who's ahead of I don't have the same concerns right now with Pollard that I do Henry, Taylor, or Jacobs. But I'm taking those top 10 wide receivers before Henry, Taylor, and Jacobs. And then Higgins, Smith, Waddle, the elite number 2s for me come after Henry, Taylor, Jacobs.
All right. And finally, anyone, and this will be a little bit of a repeat from what we said yesterday, but in this group of Lamb, Adams, A.J. Brown, St. Brown, Garrett Wilson, Jalen Waddle, I won't put Smith here just because he's not there necessarily in ADP. He's about 4 picks after Jalen Waddle, who's at the very end of round 2 in Fantasy Pros. Smith is clearly more lumped in with Higgins and Olave. But, with those 6 wide receivers, who scares you, if anyone?
Adams.
Yeah, Waddle. Like, I don't have Waddle in that group, so I guess he would have to be my answer.
Does Adams scare you too?
I'm struggling with that because of how incredibly quarterback proof Davante Adams has proven to be. Like, he averaged 100 yards per game last year with Jarrett Stidham, and he really saw very little drop off from Aaron Rodgers to Derek Carr. And I don't even remember who it was that he played 4 games with the year that Aaron Rodgers missed half the season, but he was incredible with that guy too. Like, I don't believe that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be somebody who negatively impacts Adams. And I'm not even sure that I believe that whoever's backing up Jimmy Garoppolo is going to negatively impact Adams.
Oh, what was the name of that guy? It was oh man.
I'm going to find it. It was 2017.
Yeah, I think he was something like wide receiver 8-ish during that stretch when Rodgers missed half the season.
You mean who was the backup quarterback in Green Bay?
Who was that guy?
In 2017?
I've got it.
Who is it?
If you want to guess, or I'll just tell you.
Oh, I know. I've said his name so many times. I kept bringing this up last year when he went to the Raiders, but I just can't remember. Brett Hundley. Yes.
Good job.
Thank you. The best. They say he was the best Brett that ever played quarterback for the Green Bay Packers. That's why I remembered his name. All right, so we're good there. We had a nice AJ Brown discussion yesterday. We discussed the Eagles, but if you're going to put DeVonta Smith in that, he could be a late second round pick. I guess I'll just ask you again. I mean, I am a little concerned, and nobody seems to be, about the target distribution on this team, Jamie. But if you're saying that 2 of those guys are clear top 12 guys and worthy of second round picks, or for Smith, maybe at the 2-3 turn in a 12-team league, then you don't seem to have many concerns. But my concern is I expect more running back targets for the Eagles, and I expect more Dallas Goedert targets for the Eagles. He had 69 targets last year, and I just don't know how that plays out with Philadelphia, with Brown and Smith this year.
They may get more running back targets, but I think where that comes is at the expense of having a worse run game, because I think what they're looking at here, and you're hearing all sorts of things about maybe Kenneth Gainwell is the best running back in Philadelphia. I saw something yesterday where Rashad Penny is running specifically with the second and third team as a running downs guy, and DeAndre Swift is only being used really as a pass catcher in a pass catching role. So this is going to be a very interesting scenario to see how do they replace Miles Sanders, and do they have the same success as a running team? Is it just a group? Is it just one guy? How is it going to all work out? So I think Heath said this yesterday, that this is where we see more pass attempts for Jalen Hurts. They put more on his plate as he continues to develop and grow in that area. And when he has the weapons that he has, and now including DeAndre Swift as a pass catcher, that's the strength of this team. So they'll still run, they'll still have a successful run game. But I do think that takes a step back, and the passing game takes a step forward.
And if you're going to, I think there are concerns about Brown's targets relative to other top 9 wide receivers. But if you're going to have a guy who's going to be last in targets amongst that group, should probably be the guy who's averaged 10.2 yards per target for his entire career and has an 8% touchdown rate for his entire career. Like, he's been Tyreek Hill, Tyler Lockett efficient with his targets. He could see 140 targets, and you could reasonably expect 1,400 yards and 10 touchdowns. And you can't really say that for anyone else. And then I think like if you look at what their passing game did in the first half and the second half, like he had so much more production in the first half of games last year because they were just destroying people and didn't have to throw near as much in the second half. He had 84 first half targets last year, just 61 second half targets, 908 yards in the first half of games, just 588 in the second half. Okay. If they're in competitive games and the targets stay the same, he might actually be better than he was last year.
All right, we got to wrap up on this group. I teased it at the end of yesterday's show. I forgot to bring it up today. Does Garrett Wilson's schedule bother you at all? If you think the Bills are going to be, the Bills were a pretty good matchup for wide receivers last year, but let's say Tre'Davious White gets back into form and, maybe they're tough. He's got the Bills, the Cowboys, the Patriots right out of the gate. He gets the Broncos. He gets the Eagles. The Chargers, maybe they could be tough. They've got some good corners. Obviously, the Bills again. The Dolphins, he gets twice. At least one of those games, Jalen Ramsey should be there. The first game is on November 24th. Atlanta could be, good at cornerback. Houston's been a tough. It is a tough schedule. Does it matter to you at all? On paper, anyway, it is for Garrett Wilson.
No, I think, what we're seeing is his toughest competition may be what he's dealing with in practice. Going against Sauce Gardner, those videos have been fun to see, how those battles are unfolding. Not that he's not going to face, obviously, great corners like you alluded to. But, no, Tre'Davious White's a great example. How many games did he miss last year? So there's going to be tough matchups. There's going to be guys that emerge. Those Dolphin games, Jalen Ramsey may not be there, depending on who you want to listen to. He may not be there even at that point, so no, I'm not worried about Garrett Wilson's schedule.
Well, then let's finally move on to round 3. I think it's time to do that here. So that would be that very interesting group of Davante Smith, T. Higgins, and Chris Olave, and DK Metcalf is there as well. So we said it yesterday. We do not think DK Metcalf belongs in round 3, but everybody's very comfortable with Smith, Higgins, and Olave, right?
Yep, extremely.
And you rank them how?
Smith, Higgins, and Olave.
Higgins, Smith, Olave. But they're all within, I've got them 25, 27, and 29 overall. So,
okay. And Olave, are we nervous about Michael Thomas here? It feels like that's the only thing that could really prevent a huge year, I think. My opinion.
I think it just comes at what expense you think Olave is going to, be impacted by Thomas, or is everybody else going to be impacted by both of them? And so you have a banged up Rashid Shaheed right now. I know they have a very interesting tight end group, with Juwan Johnson and now Jimmy Graham and why am I blanking on the guy from the Raiders who they signed? Foster Moreau, excuse me. It's an interesting group. Thankfully he's healthy. That's the biggest thing. But interesting group there. And will they get back to involving the running backs in the passing game? Because that sort of disappeared a little bit down the stretch. So I think really for me, it's more, okay, I hope Thomas is back. I'd love to see what that looks like. But I think it's more so that Olave is now the alpha of this receiving core, and Thomas is the 1A or 1B, depending on how you want to view it. And so while he may get his healthy share of targets, which I hope, I think Olave's target's going to be there as well, and he's more of the big play threat. So Derek Carr was great last year, in supporting one wide receiver. We saw that with Davante Adams, 180 targets. That's not going to be the case here. So I think you could see these guys, hopefully 120 plus, again, if Thomas plays the whole game. But you're also banking on Thomas not playing a full season. I'm sorry, not a full game, full season. Right. You're not – how can you expect that? He's played 10 games over 3 years. So 30 years old at this point. So you just got to hope Olave – all those missed opportunities from how bad Andy Dalton was last year and the struggles with Jameis Winston early season, Derek Carr will be better.
I hope Derek Carr is better. I think that the other minor concern is, do they remain as run heavy as they have? Like they do have a really, really weird roster construction. They've obviously made running back a pretty big priority this offseason. They're carrying a fullback. They've got like 6 tight ends. Taysom Hill's going to be taking Derek Carr off the field at times. So like there's a little bit of reason to be worried about that. But, and again, like I won't say the same thing I always say.
No, well, look, yeah. the good thing with Olave is that he had 1,042 yards in 15 games as a rookie.
Right.
That's just, it almost doesn't matter. I mean, guys who do that, that's just like rocket ship emoji for the most part. But Michael Thomas only played 3 games, and we'll see. He was pretty good. He was better than Michael Thomas the first 3 games of the season. But in those 3 games, Jameis Winston was actually very, very productive. Threw a lot of passes, threw for a ton of yards. So they had a really good passing offense in those games. They went much more run heavy later in the year. They had one of the best defenses in football. I didn't mention that. They got so good defensively, and they really were not a great fantasy team because they just kind of played keep away, it seems.
And they're going to have 6 games this year against Desmond Ridder and Baker Mayfield and a rookie quarterback.
Yeah. Okay. So round 3, I think, is pretty easy because we just don't like Metcalf in round 3, but we like all of those guys in round 4, those other 3, Smith, Higgins, and Olave, however you want to rank it. So round 4, why don't we just put Metcalf in round 4? Now, here's what's really interesting about round 4.
You're either statting ADP?
Well, I just saying
he's not there. We can just say he's the consensus bust at FFT.
Sure, but if you get him in round 4,
no.
Okay. You'd rather have him in round 5. How many of these guys would you take over DK Metcalf? Deebo Samuel, yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Calvin Ridley.
Yes.
Yes.
Do you think Calvin Ridley should be in round 3 at this point?
Yes.
Top 36?
I think I have him at exactly 36.
Amari Cooper
Yes.
over Metcalf. No Heath?
No.
Keenan Allen.
Yes.
Terry McLaurin.
Yep.
No.
Ooh, yes, that's interesting. DeAndre Hopkins.
Yep.
Yes.
DJ Moore.
Yes.
Yep.
Jerry Jeudy.
Yes.
No.
Christian Watson.
Yep.
Jamie, that's a yes for Jamie, right? Christian Watson.
Christian Watson over DK Metcalf? Yes.
Okay. So I think what's so interesting here at this range is if you look at NFC average draft position, which we have been using for a while, there are 24 wide receivers off the board by the 48th pick. If you look at Fantasy Pros, there are only 19 wide receivers off the board. If you look at CBS, I think it was around 19 as well. If you look at Draft Sharks, it's 21 wide receivers in the first 4 rounds of a 12-team league. So it's a pretty big difference to say, all right, should I get my number 2 wide receiver in the 4th round, or can I wait into the 5th round? Because if you look at like just Fantasy Pros ADP, holy cow, round 5 looks phenomenal. Round 5 is Terry McLaurin, DeAndre Hopkins, DJ Moore, Jerry Jeudy, and Christian Watson. I mean, we'd be thrilled with all or most of those guys at round 5, right? Yeah. So I can't use the, well, in our leagues, they go earlier argument. We should be using ADP. So you might be able to get someone we really, really like at wide receiver in round 5. But I guess I'll lump rounds 4 and 5. And, we'll just cut them in half. All right, ready? We got Metcalf, Deebo, Ridley, Cooper, Keenan Allen. Metcalf, Deebo, Ridley, Cooper, Keenan Allen. Who's your favorite in that group?
Metcalf, Cooper, Ridley.
Yeah, Metcalf, Deebo, Ridley, Cooper, Keenan Allen.
Ridley.
It's Deebo, Ridley, Calvin Samuel.
Okay.
Deebo for me is a bust in this range.
Okay. Go. Oh, why?
It's the same thing we saw last year, and same argument for Kittle. There's going to be a target crunch, and I know he did great with Purdy in those games, but only one game over 60 yards in the time that they were together. The rushing cratered when Christian McCaffrey was there, and I think if all these guys are going to be kept happy, and it's hard to say they're all going to be kept happy. You know, we could just sit here and say, okay, yeah, George Kittle's just going to lose. I don't think that's going to last for very long with the way that guy's personality is if he's not getting some attention. So there's going to be stretches, I think, where Deebo's frustrating. And if you look at his career arc, there's one season that stands out, and it's the one season where he was a dominant rusher. And I just think that we're chasing that production once again from 2021.
He also had almost 1,500 receiving yards that year, though. He was amazing.
He was amazing
in every aspect. Heath, you like Deebo in this range, obviously.
Yeah, I think like the one guy, if you're just looking at target share when Brock Purdy was quarterback, the one guy you shouldn't be as concerned about is Deebo Samuel. He played 5 games with Purdy, and I think, or maybe it was 4, but he was the clear target earner. Now, his efficiency was awful, and I do think you should not expect him to bounce back to that incredible year that he had. But after Christian McCaffrey got there, like there was that game against the Chiefs, which I think Deebo left early possibly. He played 86% of the snaps, and he had 1 carry in that game. But then it was 4-3-2, 4-4. I think he's probably going to have 50 rush attempts this year, which probably turns into an extra 250 to 300 yards and 3 to 5 rushing touchdowns. And he was on a 120 target pace after Christian McCaffrey got there, 125 target pace. I think a guy with his proven big play ability, and I love the fact that he's sending shirtless pictures to his head coach on a regular basis, telling him how he's going to bounce back from last year.
Yeah.
Best shape of his life. We love those. Best shape of his life.
Right. So yeah, like can he match what he did in 2021? No, I don't think so. I think 18 yards per catch and 6 yards per carry and all those touchdowns, like probably a little bit outlandish. But I do think we'll see a bounce back. His yards per target for the 4 years of his career, 9.9 in 2019, 8.9 in 2020, 11.6 in 2021, and then 6.7 last year. There's some positive regression coming.
He had one of the lowest ADOTs in the NFL among wide receivers and had still a very low catch rate, and that's just shouldn't happen. So he just can't possibly be that bad. I totally understand all the arguments for and against Deebo Samuel. He's a pretty interesting player. He's probably pretty tough to project too. But let me ask you about 2 other guys in this range, Keenan Allen and Keenan Allen and Amari Cooper. And I want to give you 2 stats here. Keenan Allen has been top 13 per game in full PPR and top 15 per game in half PPR in 6 straight seasons. Amari Cooper has never finished higher than wide receiver 15 per game. So that's pretty interesting. We're kind of hoping that Cooper can do something he's never done in his career. So even though we don't have him ranked in the top 15, but he's not far from it, right? So who do you like better, Keenan Allen or Amari Cooper? And are you comfortable with both of them as a round 4 pick?
I would prefer Amari Cooper in round 5. In PPR, I would love Keenan Allen in round 4.
Yeah, I think Keenan Allen early round 4, Amari Cooper late round 5.
Late round 5. Wow. So what is the hesitation with Cooper?
I think he's got more target competition than he had last year.
Yeah, he really might. When Watson was healthy last year, he barely out-targeted Peoples-Jones and Njoku. It was only 5 games, and now you bring in Elijah Moore. Jamie, what's your hesitation with Cooper?
Road games.
Yeah.
No, I mean, he said it. You know, there's a lot to like because, again, you know, you're getting hopefully better quarterback play. But like you said, there was, you know, the target distribution. And I guess it's just how much, and believe me, I buy into these guys, but it's just how much do you buy into still David Njoku being a significant part like he was last year, still Elijah Moore, or hoping that Elijah Moore bounces back. Where do the running back targets go if they're not going to go to Nick Chubb? You know, so, you know, that matters too. But I also think we're just going to see a better offense. You know, I mean, you're talking about, I think, all these guys now on the field, and so maybe they all benefit. You know, so I still buy into Amari Cooper as a safe number 2 wide receiver, but I do think his ceiling is capped. So it's more he's at a very good floor, but does the ceiling come down a little bit? And I think that's the concern for me.
And that's the other thing is, like you were talking about, Amari Cooper's never finished as a better than wide receiver 15, or he's never been a top 15 wide receiver.
I think 15 per game was the highest.
Right. And so, like, I have a hard time projecting a 29-year-old wide receiver to have a career year, right? Especially when it's a guy that there's not really a great reason to do that. And if the upside is wide receiver 16 to 19 per game, then I don't want to draft him as wide receiver 20 or 21 because we know there's a floor that's lower than that.
Yeah, I guess the argument for Cooper is just look at Will Fuller, right? I mean, the number 1 receiver for Deshaun Watson has been absolutely elite. And then you could say, well, it was always DeAndre Hopkins, sure, but then it was Will Fuller. Will Fuller, I think, was 8th per game before his suspension that year. So that's the argument for it. But
But to his point, though, he was ascending at the time. Cooper starting to hit the decline.
84.6 yards per game at home, 53.7 yards per game on the road. And that's not even fair because he had one amazing road game where he had 113 yards and 2 targets. And it was a neutral site game. It got moved to Detroit against the Bills.
2 touchdowns.
What did I say? 2 targets?
Yeah.
2 touchdowns on 12 targets. And it counts as a road game. For his career, Amari Cooper averages over 20 more yards per game at home, and he has 34 home touchdowns and 21 road touchdowns. All right, I could argue with you about DK Metcalf, but I'm not going to.
And the majority of Deshaun Watson's games last year were on the road. So take that into account for Cooper's production.
And then he had that one home game. It was one of the worst weather games we've seen in years.
The Saints game.
Yeah. We'll leave DK Metcalf as a round 3 bust. Some would like him in round 4. These guys would like him more in round 5, which will bring us to round 5 and why
the whole thing about Metcalf is just so fascinating because I just don't think people realize he's been outscored by Tyler Lockett. And he brought this up yesterday. He's been outscored by, someone who, when you look at them, you don't expect one to be better than the other. And then now you're bringing in this very polished rookie who is going to make things uncomfortable for everybody there. So I just don't understand. Like, you're either really expecting a big season from Geno Smith because the way that everybody else is getting drafted still, it's not like Tyler Lockett's going to the double-digit rounds. And Jackson Smith-Njigba's ADP continues to rise on a weekly basis. So I just don't get how all this works.
I would say Geno's going too low based on the ADP of the other guys. And Tua's going too low based on the ADP of his top 2 guys.
And it does feel like Tyler Lockett's clearly being penalized for JSN.
And Metcalf's not, right?
And
Metcalf's not.
But age too, maybe.
Well, he's the same age as, he's a year younger than Keenan Allen, right? And Davante Adams and DeAndre Hopkins. Or is he the same age?
No, he's a year older. He's 31.
And Keenan's 31.
Keenan is 30 or is he 31?
I believe Lockett is the oldest of that group. But
Lockett will be 31 in September. Keenan, but okay, whatever. They're in the same age. Keenan's older. He's 31 now. Same group. You're right. But I just think Keenan Allen's being penalized for his age because if he's the same guy, then he should be probably a 2-3 turn pick in a PPR league and not.
I would agree. But I think he said it best. Tyler Lockett's being penalized. But I guess the same thing could be said about Mike Williams. They're both kind of in the same scenario. They're both being penalized for a rookie being drafted, while the guy ahead of them, which by all accounts should be better. Keenan Allen's got a much better resume than Mike Williams. But DK Metcalf, it's like we just keep waiting for that big season to happen. Not that he didn't have it 2 years ago, but Tyler Lockett was just as good. That's the problem. It's just, at some point you just have to realize like he's going to be one of the best values by far, Lockett, if the receptions just don't fall off the cliff because of Smith-Njigba being there.
I think it's very strange that Metcalf's ADP is still in the 3rd round. It's almost like he's the one player that fantasy managers are just not reacting to the trends with. Everyone's really savvy these days. It is weird. Maybe you guys are a little too hard on him, but because I could Azer stat him very positively, but I think it's going to be a little.
Well, you're going to talk about the red zone opportunities, right?
I'm going to talk about the injury so he's only had one great year. It was 2020, but a 900-yard rookie season is a pretty great rookie season. So very encouraging rookie season, huge breakout in 2020 as a sophomore. 2021, he was killing it before Russell Wilson's injury. And then Russell Wilson came back, wasn't very good. And DK Metcalf played through a foot injury in the end of 2021, had off-season surgery. I have no excuse for what happened in 2022. It was simply a bad year for him. There's just no getting around it. He did have a lot of end zone targets, led the NFL in end zone targets, should have caught more touchdowns, but that doesn't explain the yardage. He had a bad year. I think the first 3 years of his career were very promising. The JSN thing, though, is obviously something that is not good.
Could I just say 2 things? Because there's somebody in the comments that I flashed one of them up. Like JSN will be the main target in Seattle by Thanksgiving. I do think that should be more of a concern for DK Metcalf backers because I think the long-term ceiling on JSN is higher. But we have this discussion. It's not wide receivers, and so I'll keep it very short. Progression is not the opposite of regression. It's regression to the mean. Regression doesn't mean getting worse. Thank you.
Okay, there you go. All right, we got to get to round 5 here, which, as I mentioned, based on Fantasy Pros ADP, round 5 is a very exciting round. We will talk about that very exciting round after this very exciting commercial break. All right, we're back to look at picks 49 through 60 in ADP on Fantasy Pros, and at wide receiver, that is Terry McLaurin, DeAndre Hopkins, DJ Moore, Jerry Jeudy, Christian Watson. McLaurin, Hopkins, Moore, Jeudy, Watson. Before I get to just analyzing these guys, the players going after them are Mike Williams, London, Godwin, Lockett, Aiyuk. Where is the tier difference? With Hopkins, McLaurin, DJ Moore, Jerry Jeudy, Christian Watson, are they a lot better than Mike Williams, Drake London, Chris Godwin, and then maybe Lockett, Aiyuk later? Or is it kind of similar?
I have a hard time answering that question because there's just no my rankings compared to this ADP are so far all over the place. Like the only real tier I see is the DeAndre Hopkins. I have a round and a half ahead of all these guys.
Okay.
Jeudy should be ahead of this group.
I don't think Heath agrees, right?
I do not, but I understand why. Like he's probably the best case for an Azer statted player, and his Azer stats are incredible.
His Azer stats is he had 3 games where he barely played. He had something like 75 yards in those 3 games. You take those games out, he averaged 15.3, I think, PPR fantasy points per game. He had Davante Smith's season. He had Jalen Waddle's full season. If you take out those 3 games. Now, of course, Waddle had the Skylar Thompson games, but let's say he had Devontae Smith's season. So he played like a 3rd rounder last year. Jerry Jeudy without those partial games. And that was on the lowest scoring team in football. And we're obviously hoping things get better for them.
Just the way he closed the season, too. I mean, it's very promising.
Oh, yeah. All right, I'll give some hot takes. Ready? I don't like Terry McLaurin as wide receiver 20. When I compare him to everyone else here, it's a pass.
Yep, 100%. He feels like Metcalf.
I've got him at wide receiver 24, but I do have him ahead of several of the guys we've talked about. So,
do you guys like DeAndre Hopkins in general?
Yes.
Hesitantly, yes.
Would you rather?
I don't think he's getting back to being an elite level guy, but I do think he can get you close to 15 points per game.
Hopkins or DJ Moore?
Hopkins.
Man, I'm so torn on those two. Right now, it's Moore.
Okay, another
back to back though.
I don't know how anyone could have any reasonable confidence in any type of projection for DJ Moore. How the hell are we supposed to know how DJ Moore's season is going to be?
I'm just leaning toward age here, and hoping that we see the look. You can make a case. This is the best quarterback he's ever played with in Fields. If Fields. Yeah, I mean it's a hope and a prayer, But
I think the easiest thing is to say that he had between 1,150 and 1,200 yards 3 straight seasons before last year, and so he's probably going to be in that range.
Okay, but he did that once. He did that on the team, I think that was 2nd in pass attempts, right? That crazy year.
Well, he did it 3 times in completely different ways. He did it once on 163 targets with 93 catches. He did it once on 118 targets with 66 catches.
Do you guys think DJ Moore could be the next Stephon Diggs, Cooper Kupp, get some quarterback upgrade, and all of a sudden become an elite wide receiver?
Yep.
I don't think you can say elite at this point because that's a huge leap. And we're getting to a point now, especially, look, how many Bears receivers have ever been elite? Musa Muhammad once said when he went there and failed. Yeah, I mean, it's few and far between, right? Musa Muhammad once had a famous quote where it was, Chicago's where receivers go to die. Now, there's been a lack of great receivers there. They always have, traditionally great run game. I hope he can become a star. I don't know if he'll become elite.
When I answered the question, I was answering it assuming that Justin Fields could become the next quarterback to benefit from a huge wide receiver upgrade. Like he cannot become the next Stephon Diggs or whoever other names you said if Justin Fields plays quarterback like he did last year? No. But there's lots of third-year quarterbacks that we're expecting a big jump from, right? Or at least one.
So how would you guys rank Hopkins, Judy, Moore, Christian Watson?
Judy, Moore, Hopkins, Watson.
Watson, Hopkins, Moore, Judy.
I'm surprised, Jamie, that Watson is fourth for you in that group behind Judy, Moore, and Hopkins. I thought Watson was like your guy.
Very excited about Christian Watson, but I think, again, you got to sort of factor in a little bit of what is Jordan Love, and is he going to support Watson taking a huge step? I think he takes a big step, but a huge step. And then you also have to factor in they like Romeo Doubs, they like Reed, they're using their tight ends a lot. It's a very young group, and Aaron Jones is still going to be a big factor as well. So they're picks apart. It's not like one guy's a round ahead of the other. These are all, in my opinion, great round 4 picks.
Yeah, and look, if the ADP is right, take one in round 4 and take one in round 5. Give yourself a couple of shots here for either some young breakouts, more still young, and Judy and Watson, or Hopkins is not young, but he's still Hopkins. And then Mclaurin. Does Mclaurin feel closer to Mike Williams, Drake London, Chris Godwin, or what? Mike Williams ADP in between London and Godwin is kind of weird to me, but
Williams is too high, but Metcalf is too high as well. You alluded to this on a show a few weeks ago when Dan was singing the praises of Terry McLaurin, and then he agreed with you, shockingly, when you told him about the downfalls. I think Jahan Dotson's a problem. I think we have to see if Sam Howell can elevate 2 guys, and get them to, heights that we've never seen from McLaurin, but also, helping Dotson take the next step. So I think for me, like, I would put McLaurin, I wouldn't draft him the same way, but the way that I defined Amari Cooper, I think the ceiling is capped, but the floor is pretty good. So he's a good number 2 receiver, but for me, he's in the group of Drake London, Chris Godwin, Deontay Johnson, Christian Kirk. Good, can be a safe number 2 receiver, but I think the upside is capped.
What's kind of interesting here, if you think about these wide receivers that, did I cut you off, Heath?
No, I feel like there's a little bit of crapping on Terry McLaurin going. Maybe I missed the point that Dan agreed with so much about Terry McLaurin.
It was this simple. It doesn't matter how good of a wide receiver we think Terry McLaurin is in real life. He's never been on a good passing offense. He hasn't been on a 3,800-yard passing offense, and he's never finished higher than wide receiver 20 per game in any format. I think it's wide receiver 22 or 3 per game in full PPR. So it's just unfortunate. He doesn't catch a lot of touchdowns. He's got a higher kind of ADOT, so he doesn't get like cheap touchdowns. And my point was just, it's not a real-life argument with McLaurin. It's simply, how can he be better? Because he's just so held back by his offense, and he's never been higher than wide receiver 20.
Yeah, I think the hope would be that Washington's offense is going to be better this year.
Then
a different offensive coordinator and a different. I mean, I wouldn't expect it to be the same. Everything's different.
It could be worse, and they've been pretty.
He's gone through a lot of different offenses already, though, in his young career, and a lot of quarterbacks.
Right, yeah, but I think this is a part of a broader point. Is when you think about the guys who break out and have surprisingly great seasons, I would say they're on surprisingly great offenses. And you go to Jalen Waddle last year, and I remember this time last year saying, I don't want Jalen Waddle at the end of round 4 because I think his upside is capped with the presence of Tyreek Hill. It was one of my worst takes. I don't think I was alone in it, but I never thought the Dolphins offense could be nearly as good, or Tua would be nearly as good as it was. And when I look at all of these receivers going here, I don't know how many of them can be on great offenses. And then the one that really jumps out is Mike Williams. But he's not even close to my favorite. He's not even close to anybody's favorite in this range. Maybe the Bears could have a great offense. I don't know. But I mean, do you guys think about that with McLaurin, Hopkins, DJ Moore, Jerry Jeudy, Christian Watson, Mike Williams, Drake London, Chris Godwin, rounds 5 or 6 guys? Where's the offensive breakout?
Well, I mean, how many of the offenses that we're now saying were really great last year? Like, we've accepted the Detroit Lions as the top 5 offense. How hard would you have laughed at that at this time last year?
it's hard to predict, but it's still something that we might want to spend some time predicting because wide receiver and offensive production are very much tied together. Wide receiver fantasy points.
No, it's a fair point, but that's why for me, like McLaurin's in this group of, I hope Sam Howell's great. I hope Eric Bieniemy's offense is great. There's already a lot of bitching coming out of that team about how he's coaching these guys, so the frustration is probably starting to mount a little bit. Can essentially, well, not a rookie starter, but a first-year starter with one start under his belt in Sam Howell, who may show that he is going to run as much as he wants to throw, from his profile, can he support these two guys? And then when you factor in, well, we like Antonio Gibson and Curtis Samuel, I don't think is going away. And then whatever Logan Thomas and the tight end group does, there's a lot of mouths to feed here. And so that's why for me, he's in more of there's some questionable quarterbacks, and Drake London's got a questionable quarterback, but he's got a world of potential. Christian Kirk now has some competition, with Calvin Ridley. Can he still be as productive? Deontay Johnson's going to get a hell of a lot of targets, but is he going to get a hell of a lot of targets from a bad Kenny Pickett with an emerging George Pickens and an emerging Pat Fryman? There's questions with these guys. And so that's for me where Terry McLaurin belongs, because I think there's questions. There's been a lack of consistent production, of top tier production. He's been very consistent, but there's been a lack of top tier production. And I think Jahan Dotson brings him down a little bit from reaching that top tier production.
And I think
he's, sorry, like I said, I've said this many a time, almost wide receiver, 15, 18, whatever you want to, put the cutoff, through 30. I'm perfectly fine with that group. If you tell me I'm taking one of them as my second and third wide receivers, I think that's a very big group and a lot of potential.
And I guess that's what I was saying. Like, I agree with pretty much everything Jamie said about like the situation for McLaurin. It's just that like the quarterbacks of the guys who are going right after him are Ryan Tannehill, Justin Fields, the ghost of Russell Wilson, Jordan Love. Like, it's not as if.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Yeah.
Like, so we're saying, well, McLaurin can't be in this range because he's in this bad offense with a bad quarterback, and everybody that's being drafted around him is.
I mean, I wouldn't say he can't be in that range. He's just not the one that I draft there. And especially if you like Dotson as much as you do. But yeah, no, I mean, it's a fair point. And then I think it brings you to a guy like Christian Kirk or Mike Williams.
Kirk, I've got like way ahead of this group. So
okay, so
you like the Christian Kirk guy.
Good. Yeah. So sometimes getting that number 2 guy on a better offense makes a lot of sense, like Devontae Smith last year, for example, or Tyler Lockett last year. Again, those were examples of offenses that we never thought would be as good as they were, at least the passing game for the Eagles. So that is hard to predict, but a lot of things are hard to predict in fantasy. How would you guys rank Drake London, Terry McLaurin, Chris Godwin?
London, Godwin, McLaurin.
London, McLaurin, Godwin.
And London's interesting because I always thought of him as sort of like a 4 or 5 turn kind of wide receiver. Like he would be there. I felt early in the process, people really liked him, and that's where he's going on NFC. And we had been using that for so long, but he's not going anywhere near that on the other websites. Fantasy Pros, he's wide receiver.
What receiver number is he on NFC?
22.
Okay, so that's still
Pros, yeah, on Fantasy Pros, he's 26, going 67th. On CBS, he's going after George Pickens, who's got a pretty high ADP. But
I think that makes sense because London is viewed, but there's a lot of high stakes leagues in those NFC drafts, and those young elite talents get pushed up in that format because those are the guys who have the breakout if things do go okay.
Mm-hmm. And on Draft Sharks, he's wide receiver 26. He's going behind DJ Moore, Jerry Jeudy, Christian Watson, and Chris Godwin. So I think much more comfortable ADP if you want to get in on Drake London there. Where do you think Mike Williams should go? Because in Fantasy Pros, he goes ahead of London, Godwin, Lockett, Aiyuk.
I think he's, depending on how heavy the wide receiver draft is, end of round 5, beginning of round 6. Again, he's going. We keep talking about, if Quentin Johnson takes a step forward, and if Mike Williams gets hurt, and if Keenan Allen gets hurt, well, what if these guys don't get hurt? And they get the motivation of maybe losing their job, to that big season. Justin Herbert's going to have a big year if he stays healthy and things work out. I do think Kellen Moore is going to help him. I think the rib injury, he's talked about that. I heard him on Colin Cowherd's show earlier this week, and he was saying how he had to adjust his arm angle because he couldn't throw over the top because of the rib injury. So, now his mechanics are back to being normal. His protection is going to be better. And I think with Quentin Johnson on the field, especially if that's the plan to have all three of those guys together, they're talking about Mike Williams playing in the slot a little bit more, so those receptions tick up a little bit. So while the big plays will still be there, maybe it comes down a little bit because of a potential role change. He's not going to play exclusively in the slot, but that just opens up the potential of more catches. And if he's getting more receptions and still a red zone threat and still a big play threat, like he could really be a huge steal at his cost. So I don't run away from Mike Williams. I don't love the ceiling because, again, of Quentin Johnson being there, but I don't run away from him. I think, again, round 5 in a heavy receiver draft, round 6 is the sweet spot for me, though.
Yeah, amongst the guys you said, I've got Godwin, Williams, Aiyuk back to back, but all of them in round 6. So okay. I'm pretty much okay with whichever those guys falls to round 6, but I'm not going into round 5 for any of them. And there's several guys we've not talked about that I have ahead of them.
Such as?
Lockett just ahead of those guys, Jordan Addison, Jahan Dotson, Deontay Johnson.
Okay, let's take a break and we'll talk about those guys after this. We're into round 7 of average draft position on Fantasy Pros, and that is Tyler Lockett, Brandon Aiyuk, Mike Evans, Christian Kirk, Deontay Johnson, and Michael Pittman. So it's a fairly big group. Tyler Lockett, Brandon Aiyuk, Mike Evans, Christian Kirk, Deontay Johnson, and Michael Pittman. Just before we went to break, Heath, you said that Lockett, Kirk, and Deontay were the standouts here, right?
Yeah, it's Kirk and then a gap, and then Deontay and then a gap, and then Lockett for me.
And Jamie, again, the 6 receivers are Lockett, Aiyuk, Christian Kirk, Deontay Johnson, Michael Pittman. I missed one. Mike Evans, too.
Yeah, I agree with Heath. Kirk and Johnson, to me, are the difference makers here. I would take them over Mclaurin, for example, and over Godwin. So I like the upside for those 2 guys still. I do think Deontay Johnson will score a touchdown, hopefully a few. And Kirk will, still be good, but I just think his ceiling, again, is now capped. And so it's a matter of, how much does he lose with Calvin Ridley on the field? And we'll find out.
Aiyuk is tough. I have not read a single bad thing. I haven't read anything that hasn't been exceedingly glowing about Brandon Aiyuk during camp. He's just, everyone is talking about him. But how does it happen? He was really barely involved compared to Deebo with Purdy, who doesn't have a strong arm. So I don't know. Could he really have that breakout? Because, advanced metrics guys, film guys love Brandon Aiyuk. I almost want to take him just in case. But Jamie, what do you think about Aiyuk?
I agree 100%. This is the same, ties into my Deebo Samuel argument. Like, how do all these guys survive with a quarterback coming off of elbow surgery in an offense that all these mouths have to be fed, a strong run game? And so, yeah, I think it's hard to justify a Brandon Aiyuk breakout without an injury, or just something, different happening that we haven't seen from the 49ers. Now, the way that he wins is the way that most of the 49ers win, is that they get these guys open in space, and he's having a big year from a touchdown perspective and a big year with a lot of yak and a lot of big plays, which is what he's capable of doing. So for me, he's safer as a number 3 wide receiver as opposed to a number 2 guy, which I think some people like to draft him as. But I think if you do take a chance on, these number 3 type of guys, Aiyuk, Mike Williams, Tyler Lockett, big play caliber receivers, Gabe Davis, at the bottom end of it, that's where you're hoping to win. You're not banking on a significant amount of receptions carrying them. You're counting on the big plays and the touchdowns to carry them.
All right, so to sum it up, this group here, the 3 guys that we think are undervalued: Christian Kirk, for sure, Deontay Johnson, and we agreed on Tyler Lockett. That was
Lockett's in this range for me, but lower.
Yeah, I don't know what round we're at now in ADP. Lockett's a round 6 pick for me. He was just the 3rd highest ranked of the group of players you said.
Is Mike Evans the lowest rank of that group? Or Mike Evans or Michael Pittman, do you ever find yourself drafting them? They're currently round 7 ADPs.
Settling for, not, reaching for. So this is I don't want to say it's a reach, but this is, the range I think where they should start to come into play. But again, that comes with two caveats. One, is it a very heavy receiver draft? And two, have other guys come off the board. For me, I like two rookies better in Jordan Addison and Jackson Smith and Najigba that I would take over Pittman and Evans at this point.
I agree with that. And Evans, I'm okay with at the end of round 7. I might get to the point where I take a third rookie, Zay Flowers, over him as well. But I'm okay with him around pick 84. This could be proved to be wrong, but I just have no interest in Michael Pittman. He's at the end of round 8 for me. I don't think I've drafted him once.
I was thinking about this. Is this crazy? The difference between the Michael Pittman ranking, if he had a full season of Gardner Minshew versus a full season of Anthony Richardson, might be something like 20 spots at wide receiver.
I hope
Is that
not.
crazy? Too much?
What's his wide receiver ranking now?
You tell me. I mean, he's 33rd in ADP, but you don't like him so much. I feel like you probably have him lower than that.
Would 33rd be his best per game finish in the NFL?
No. Last year he was 21, I think. The year before that,
per
he
game?
was pretty good. Yeah, 21.
He had
PPR.
925 yards in 16 games.
He had 99 catches.
Yeah.
So he was 21 per game. He was 36 per game in non-PPR, 21 in full PPR.
Okay.
This is Michael Pittman we're talking about. In 2021, he was 27th per game in both formats. 2021 was a good year for Michael Pittman. They were terrible. And he had 88 catches, almost 1,100 yards, 6 touchdowns on a team that threw for less than 3,600 yards in 17 games. So
that was Rivers, right?
Wentz, I think.
Oh, Wentz was 20, right.
So it was encouraging, but
Rivers was his rookie season.
Last year was not. All right. Well, it doesn't matter. I mean, we're projecting Anthony Richardson. So, all right.
Let's go with the Colts. I mean, you're counting on an injury for Gardner Minshew to play.
Well, but keep in mind, I mean, if Richardson really stinks in the preseason, it's possible that he doesn't start week 1.
I would be shocked. And if he doesn't start week 1, he's playing week 2.
Okay. I think rounds 9 and 10 are pretty cool, pretty exciting. Some nice names here. We're 34 wide receivers in. And tell me if you guys, agree or disagree. How about tell me draft-o-meter, 0 to 10. How likely are you to draft this guy if you see him in round 9 or 10 or 8 or 9? 8 or 9. My bad. I skipped around. Still, I think it's exciting. 0 to 10. How likely are you to draft Marquise Brown?
8.5, 9.
Yeah, 9.
Okay, we like him. George Pickens.
7.5, 8.
5.5, 6.
Jackson Smith and Jigba.
9.
8.5.
Jahan Dotson.
1 million.
9.
Okay, so far so good with Pickens being the lowest. How about Jordan Addison?
8.5.
500,000.
Yeah. Well, you'd rather have Dotson than Addison?
I would.
So this is where I just say I'm just going to go with the better offense here, and I feel very confident that Minnesota will have a better offense.
I think they will have a better offense. I think that obviously there's a TJ Hawkinson that doesn't exist in Washington, but yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay.
It's also Justin Jefferson doesn't exist.
That's true. I was assuming Jefferson's not playing this year. JK. Traylon Burks. Oh, no, wait. Brandon Cooks before Traylon Burks. Brandon Cooks.
4.5, 5.
Yes, he's in the Pickens range. 6, I guess.
Traylon Burks.
Same.
How about this? Traylon Burks. I thought about this. Maybe my favorite teammate strategy. We take Hopkins and Burks.
Yeah.
I'm surprised though, because usually you would do this with more of a prolific offense.
I know, that's the weird thing. I mean, look, I think my favorite based on ADP would be Jefferson and Addison, but you only get one chance at Jefferson if you don't.
For me, it would probably be Chargers with Johnston.
I might do McLaurin. I'd do McLaurin and Dotson probably.
Yeah, I just feel like
that's going against the theory of taking a prolific passing game.
That's not part of the theory necessarily. The theory,
I mean,
it's better. It's always better. The theory is you take two guys that you think are both good at their ADP, but if one of them gets hurt, you you've got in any scenario, you have one absolute must start.
Well, I'll tell you one guy I draft a ton of. It's the third guy. It's Tyler Boyd.
Really?
He's free.
Yeah. Okay.
You do it with all the Chiefs guys. I mean, it's easy.
Not really, because you don't have a guaranteed starter there.
Oh, you want to have a guaranteed starter? I see.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So, all right, you said you're kind of low on like mid on Burks and Cooks. Michael Thomas.
6.5, 7.
Yeah, he's right in that Burks range.
We've clearly hit a tier here where we're excited about Marquise Brown.
Gabe Davis has gone yet or no?
No, he's still there.
That's crazy.
Marquise Brown, JSN, Dotson, Jordan Addison. We like those guys. We're less enthused about Pickens, which is interesting. We can talk about him in a bit. Pickens, Brandon Cooks, Treylon Burks, Michael Thomas. It's not that we don't want these guys. We're just not as excited to get them as we are Marquise Brown, JSN, Jordan Addison, Jahan Dotson. And Gabe Davis would be higher, right? Like Gabe Davis on this meter?
Yes.
8-ish?
Yeah.
9-ish?
Yeah.
How about Odell Beckham, Juju Smith-Schuster, or Cortland Sutton?
They're in Michael Thomas range. Not Beckham, but those other guys. So 5.5, 6-ish.
Yeah, Juju, Sutton, Beckham.
All right, so let's say Pickens, Cooks, Burks, Juju are all on the board. Who do you take?
Well, Pickens easily. I mean, banking on upside there.
I think I'd still go Burks.
Okay. Why is it that people are so polarized on Pickens, you think? Some people really like him.
Because he makes super duper highlight catches, and he had 14 fewer targets than Pat Freiermuth in one more game last year.
The biggest thing will be is how much does his route tree expand, and what type of targets will he be getting? And it's the biggest drawback for me is Kenny Pickett. Is he going to take a step forward? I mean, what they had 8 passing touchdowns last year?
12.
12.
One of them was Chase Claypool, or maybe they had 13 and one of them was Chase Claypool.
It's that's miserable. And so when one guy is going to get so many targets, and as Heath said, which I agree, who's going to be number 2? I think it's a competition for it. Now, I hope it's Pickens, just because of the nature of how these guys, or the positions that they play. But it's hard to say Pickens has the ability to stand out. The nice thing is the plays that he's making against pretty good corners on his own team. So that's a very good defense that they're going up against. But there's a lot of times where you're seeing it's offensive pass interference that he's getting these catches. And
yes.
And if you really watch the quarterback, he's getting sacked on a lot of those plays too. It's the defense is just stopping and letting him throw.
And I don't really think there's a reason that there's so much offensive pass interference on those plays, is because a lot of times when Kenny Pickett lets go of the ball, the George Pickens and the defensive player are standing right next to each other.
Correct. That's the thing. It's like you love the contested. Dave and I had this conversation when he made the bet of who's going to get more targets, Pickens or Johnson. He's like, well, he's great in contested catches. The reason for that is quarterback can't throw him open,
and he doesn't get open.
Some guys are like that though. Like Kenny Golladay was like that. They're not guys who get.
If you stop, if you're comparing him to Kenny Golladay, he's in trouble.
No, wrong.
Kenny Golladay had one good season.
No, Kenny Golladay had 2. They had a great second season
with Matthew Stafford.
Right. I mean, that's the thing. I actually think if Kenny Pickett is good, it would really shake up fantasy football quite a bit. Nobody's really expecting.
I do think like those. The really good years or year that Golladay had was on a team that was throwing quite a bit more than league average. We've talked about the reason for drafting Najee Harris is because there's this thought that the Steelers are going to go super run heavy this year, like they did in the second half last year. Well, if that happens, it's not very good for the guy who had a 14% target share last year.
Yeah. No, and it's not good for Deontay Johnson either. Because Johnson was good when they were throwing 39 or more times per game.
Well, if you throw 500 passes and you have a guy who gets close to a 30% target share, he can still be really, really good in PPR.
Yeah, it's not good for anyone, though, in the passing game if they're run heavy. But yeah, you're right. Right. I think to just assume that George Pickens is going to have a 14% target share again isn't fair. He was a rookie, and hopefully
he needs a 20%.
Hopefully he's the most talented receiver on the team. Maybe he's just about to take off.
Just yeah.
He had averaged 15 yards per catch last year. Not a lot of rookies average 15 yards per catch with 80 or more targets.
Look, there's a lot to like, but there's reason to be concerned. And so Dave is excited, understandably so. You watch these highlights, you see his contested catches, you see the profile. Look, he was undervalued coming out of college because of some of the issues and the injury concern. And so did he end up in the best spot to maximize his production potential? No. Could that change, as you said, Adam, if we get a better season out of Kenny Pickett? Sure. But that's a hope. Like where I have him ranked is more based on the hope. I think Heath is just going with the raw numbers, which I get.
All right, let's talk about everyone else here as we finish on George Pickens. So after, I guess we're at the Gabe Davis range here. About 45-ish wide receivers in. 41 was Michael Thomas. 42 was Beckham. 43 was Juju. 44 was Cortland Sutton. Now Gabe Davis, wide receiver 45. And he's not that low on the other websites. Gabe Davis is, Gabe Davis on Draft Sharks is 42. Okay. Gabe Davis on NFC is 37, but we like the value regardless. So after that, we have Kadarius Toney. So we should probably just talk about the Chiefs at this point. I don't know if Toney's still the first one off the board. It's probably Skyy Moore. Where do you guys think Skyy Moore should be drafted? Should he go ahead of Michael Thomas, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Cortland Sutton?
I have him right now right behind Thomas, but I could see myself changing that. It's just a matter of at what point does Kadarius Toney become Kadarius Toney and make it a problem for, I think, all those guys if he becomes, the player that we're hoping he can eventually become. But all you're hearing is just positive things about Skyy Moore. And I think the best thing is that right now, if they were to line up in 12 personnel, he's on the field.
He is their starting slot receiver.
But he's also playing in 2 receiver sets.
That's I think the thing that is really, and I tweeted about this morning, like, is that just because there's no Toney? If Toney's back at some point, is Skyy Moore just playing in 3 wide receiver sets? I don't know the answer to that. I would, of the guys you mentioned, Adam, I would take Moore over Sutton. That's the only one. I take the other 2 guys over Skyy. I struggle with Skyy Moore versus George Pickens.
Okay. I struggle with Skyy Moore versus Kadarius Toney. I totally understand Toney's always hurt, but Toney has at least done some good things in his NFL career that are really encouraging. I'm not going to hold it against Skyy Moore that he hasn't, but I am going to give a point in Kadarius Toney's favor that he has been at times, very few times, really, really exciting.
Yeah, but to be fair, I think you judge them based on their Chiefs tenure. And, one guy got a full offseason, one guy was traded midseason, so take that into account. But neither was really used very much.
No, but that wouldn't really be my point. With the Giants, at least we saw that Kadarius Toney could be in a very small.
It was a game and a half.
No, it was 2.5. It was actually 2.
Sorry.
But it was really impressive. What he did, especially in the game he got hurt, 1 drive against the Rams. He had like 3 catches for 39 yards. What I'm saying is he did something that Skyy Moore has never done.
Sure.
Yes.
There's a pedigree difference. One guy was a 1st-round pick, one guy's a 2nd-round pick. But I would take the guy that probably has more familiarity with the offense and has been on the field more times than not this offseason. And they both have a world of potential.
Last point. Before Kadarius Toney's injury, everything I read was about Kadarius Toney and about how he was the guy that the Chiefs were banking on. It was not about Skyy Moore.
Right, but it is
Kadarius Toney.
Worth remembering that he was injured at the first practice of the year. So everything that we heard about that was before they started training camp.
Well, I mean, they do have mini camps though. So to be fair.
Yeah.
All right, let's just tell me. I'm going to name some names. Tell me if you want them on your team. Quentin Johnston, Zay Flowers.
Yes.
Zay over Johnston, but yeah, I'm fine with both at round 8 or 9 or later.
Agreed.
Jamie, Zay over Johnston?
Zay over Johnston, yes. Now, that could change if he gets a lot of positive reports about Rashad Bateman, but, I think Flowers getting that head start is important.
I know you want Skyy Moore, so I'll read the other names in this late round group. Adam Thielen, Alan Lazard, Jamison Williams.
I draft a lot of Jameson Williams, typically as a fifth receiver, with the hope of when he comes back, he's going to be the guy that he was expected to be. So I would take him over Adam Thielen for sure. Who else did you say?
Lazard, never.
No.
For me anyway. Jameson Williams, Adam Thielen, and Alan Lazard. That's who I said. How about Skyy Moore or Jameson Williams?
Skyy Moore.
Oh yeah. The only one I've drafted out of this group is Adam Thielen, and that's later than this.
I think it's bad news for Adam Thielen. There was a report a few days ago, earlier this week, that at least in one practice, Bryce Young's starting to lean more on Hayden Hurst as his safety blanket than Adam Thielen. Because if Adam Thielen's not the safety blanket, he's going to be in trouble.
Who's your first Panthers receiver off the board?
DJ Chark.
Right now it's Thielen.
Okay. Jacoby Myers, Elijah Moore, Tyler Boyd. Jamie, you like two of these guys, right? As late round picks.
Elijah Moore is in a different category for me.
Yeah, way ahead.
Yes.
And Boyd is someone you take for free.
Boyd is just Boyd to me is, again, I wrote about this in the 10-team recap. I took him as my fifth receiver in a 15-round draft in round 15. It's just, if there's an injury, I don't know if he's going to become a weekly starter, but he's going to be very popular for his quarterback, which would make him very popular in turn for fantasy managers.
Okay. Rashad Bateman, Darnell Mooney, Rondale. Oh, I like Rondale Moore. But Rashad Bateman, Darnell Mooney, Rondale Moore, Jalen Hyatt.
The thing that makes me concerned about Rondale Moore is that when they're in two receiver sets, I don't think he's on the field. And this is now a regime change. They like Michael Wilson a lot.
And the question in that Arizona passing game is going to be who can be healthy. Because Rondale Moore's had all kinds of trouble staying healthy. Michael Wilson was never healthy in college. I do think it does sound like it's Marquise Brown and Michael Wilson in two wide receiver sets.
You have to run, Jamie?
Yeah, I do.
All right. We'll finish off with Heath here. So is they need the studio for HQ. Look, we're at wide receiver 58 here, so I don't need him to be on the field in two receiver sets. But he's a very short area target, Rondale Moore, who could just rack up some cheap catches. Was there anything you wanted to say about Bateman? Hold on, wait, don't do that. Oh, that's terrible. Hold on. Okay, go ahead, Jamie. Bateman, Darnell Mooney, or Jalen Hyatt?
I have Bateman and Mooney a lot higher than Jalen Hyatt. I think Bateman or Mooney are fine around 10 picks. I don't like for Bateman the fact that that we've seen Zay Flowers get so much more run before he got there. But I also think like Mooney, if Justin Fields takes that leap, we could see two wide receivers in Chicago be good.
Okay, we've got Zay Jones, Nico Collins. I know we like that one a lot.
Nico's a great one.
Yeah, Michael Gallup.
No.
KJ Osborne, Rashee Rice, Jonathan Mingo, Romeo Dobbs, DJ Chark.
So Dobbs I love as well, and I like Mingo, and I would take Tank Dell over the rest of these guys.
There you go, Tank Dell. Take him late. What about Justin Ross or Tank Dell?
I'll take Dell.
All right. Anyone else? Jaden Reed, Hunter Renfrow, DPJ, John Mechie, Chase Claypool, Curtis Samuel.
I think Reed is right there in that Mingo and Tank Dell range as rookie wide receivers who have a chance to make an impact.
Last but certainly not least, Giants wide receiver. Give me one.
I have my highest ranked Giants wide receiver is not listed in my rankings on the wide receiver rankings page.
I'm going Slayton.
It is currently, I have Isaiah Hodgins at 168 overall. But yeah, Slayton, or I've got most of them all between 168 and 175. When you get to round 15 in your fantasy drafts, you just start low. And I think that happened in our pick by pick. It might have been round 14, but there were like 5 Giants wide receivers taken in one round.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think they're probably all going to be dropped, but Hodgins or Slayton, it sounds like Slayton's having a great camp. I just don't know. Like he kind of is in that Pickens mold. Is he ever going to have consistently more than 5 or 6 targets a game?
Funny you bring up Pickens and Slayton. Slayton was a rookie wide receiver who averaged 15 yards per catch or better and did not end up having a very good career so far. Not bad, but not fantasy relevant, really. Also, Paris Campbell is their slot guy and might lead the receivers, at least in catches. All right, that's it for this show. That's it for wide receivers. That's it for our position previews. This will evolve, and definitely want a lot more debate. You know, sometimes in these previews, we don't get to really get into the debate in the mid rounds, for example, why Jerry Jeudy versus Christian Watson or whatever it might be. So we'll do some of that in the upcoming weeks. Mailbag coming up later today if you're watching, or tomorrow if you're listening. Have an awesome weekend, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.